I just wanted to welcome all of you tonight to the Yellcrest Neighborhood Council meeting, April 14th. And we have some marvelous presenters tonight. We're looking forward to hearing from our guest speakers. I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to beginning with Lisa. And Lisa, would you just tell us who you are? And we were going to have a little spiel from our good friend Carly Nielsen, but she had an emergency, and Lisa is her associate and is going to, is it Lisa Dyer?
Yes.
Lisa, if you would just go ahead and tell us about the wonderful Easter egg hunt in the snow.
Yeah.
We hope it's not.
I actually checked on the park this morning, and I'm seeing a lot of melted snow. So I'm feeling pretty encouraged that the eggs will be locatable and findable, and it'll be a good morning.
Great.
So
Tell us a little bit about it, and if you want to go ahead and tease the the yard sale in September.
Yeah, definitely. For I think this is our 6th year, Carly has put on a really great neighborhood Easter egg hunt. So she invites the whole neighborhood, and it's all free to everybody. And it starts around 10 o'clock. We usually have 2 food trucks. We have some live music. The Easter Bunny walks around. The kids can come out, and they just search for Easter eggs all throughout the park. And in past years, it's been kind of hectic. So what we do is we let the kids find Easter eggs, but all the eggs are empty. So they all get a little tote of treats, so that there's no, shoving, and the older kids get more than the little kids do. So it works out really nice. But we just wanted everyone to know that it's free, it's open to the whole neighborhood. And, please do come if you can. Let's see, what else do I have? Oh, the yard sale. So Carly's definitely hoping to bring the yard sale back this year. And that's just a really fun event. So all the homes in the neighborhood can, on the same day, have the opportunity to put out some items that other people might be interested in, other people might be able to use. And it's just a really fun day of kind of driving around the neighborhood and seeing what people have out.
We'll look forward to that, and we'll definitely show up at the park on Saturday.
Yay, that sounds
I won't
great.
be fighting. I promise I won't be fighting for the Easter eggs, but I'll be there to take pictures.
Good.
Lisa,
Good.
thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Do you guys have any questions or anything?
It's a really fun event.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear it. It is really fun. There's just such a joy to see the park full of that many people, that many neighbors. People are just, they're out and they're mingling and they're together, and it's really nice.
I think it's going to be a little warmer too.
I just saw that the rain cleared, so that was another weight off too.
Great.
Yeah. And this is our first one, because we weren't able to do it last year or the year before because of COVID. So this is our first one after a 2-year hiatus.
Wow.
Well, it'll be fun, and we're looking forward to it. Thank you for all your planning and preparation. I understand there's going to be music and food trucks.
Yeah.
Right.
But we'll have 2 food trucks and a live band.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be festive, and we look forward to it. Thank you, Lisa.
You're so very welcome. Thank you, guys.
And now I'd like to turn the time over to David Ammett. I hope I got that right. I actually got pronunciation guides from all of our speakers, most of them, so that David is the executive director of Preservation Utah, and have come to know him and appreciate his work as kind of a defender, a crusader, and a very thoughtful person in our community regarding historic places, historic districts, historic homes. These are things that I think that are worth preserving and honoring. And we in Yellcrest, of all places, should be on the forefront of that. And I think we're trying to do that. But David, we're going to turn the next 15 or so minutes over to you. If you've got a PowerPoint presentation, I can make you a co-host.
I do.
I'm going to, okay, I just made you a co-host.
Okay, well, I'm going to share then. And thank you, Jen, for that introduction. And I'm just going to jump into my PowerPoint.
Great.
Can everyone see the big orange screen? Wonderful. And my head orange as well, it seems. Anyway, thank you for your time, everyone. I appreciate that you have a full schedule, so I don't want to take a second more than I need to, so that other matters of business can be discussed. But I so appreciate the time that you've given me and the organization and the issue of preservation in Utah and also in your neighborhood in particular. As Jan noted, I represent Utah, well, Heritage Foundation. I'm still calling it that, even though we changed our name now going on 6 years. We started as the Utah Heritage Foundation. We're now Preservation Utah. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with Preservation Utah, the Utah Heritage Foundation. Some of you may not be. So our story in a nutshell is that 1966, we were established by then First Lady of Utah, Lucy Beth Rampton, who we see here, and Calvin Rampton, the governor of Utah. And ever since then, we have been working to save Utah's heritage, particularly its built heritage, but also Utah's unique culture in other respects and other aspects. I do love this article title, Utah Heritage Fund Drive Opens. This article is dated August 30th, 1966. This fund drive, I think, launched on that day, August 30th, 1966, and still hasn't ended. So I'm mindful that many of Preservation Utah's greatest supporters live in this area in Yellcrest. And I thank you all for your support. You've all been very generous, and we couldn't be around without you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. On a personal note, I've never lived in Yellcrest, but it strangely is a home to me, in large part because my father and his parents lived in Yellcrest. They lived in about 5 or 6 different homes. Here are 3 of them, 1345 Princeton, 1435 Logan, and they spent most of their time 1588 Yale. They were there for about 20 years. This is what 1588 Yale looked like when my grandparents owned it back in the 30s and 40s into the 50s. It seemed like they loved pyracantha. But my grandmother drove me past this house throughout her life when she was still alive, and told me about all the family memories, from first days at school to graduation parties to, of course, holidays celebrated in all of these houses. And so, strangely, because of those stories, I feel very connected to your neighborhood. And again, I'm thrilled to be speaking to all of you, because again, your neighborhood, while it's never been my home, strangely feels like home to me. In terms of topics to discuss today in relation to historic preservation, Jan was good enough to send me some questions that she had gathered from all of you, her neighbors there in Yellcrest. These questions include: how does the Utah State Legislature generally feel about historic preservation? What happened to tax credits this season? Do other cities have local historic districts, or do they just exist in Salt Lake? Questions along those lines. What I've done is I've prepared for you a state of the field of preservation, historic preservation at this moment. And over the course of this next few minutes, I hope to give you a general idea of where preservation is going, where it is currently, where it's going, and perhaps address some of these questions along the way. But I'll try to finish early, so if you have additional questions, you can ask me. A lot of these questions seem to suggest that preservation in Utah, at least the way I interpret them initially, was that preservation was on the decline generally in Utah. And I can say that's true, and I can also say that's very much not the case. I had to write a book once, and ever since I wrote that book, I've been fascinated with the way that other authors started their books. I think the first lines of any book are the most fascinating, because I've had such difficulty writing the first lines of what I had to write, that was the hardest part. So I'm kind of a connoisseur of book first lines. I don't think that any author could beat the first lines of one of my favorite novels, A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And I think this sums up the state of preservation in Utah in the moment, and really any moment, just because of the way this world works and we humans engage with each other. I would say that this is the very best moment for preservation in Utah. And it's also a down moment in other ways. It is the epic of belief, it's the epic of incredulity, the season of light, the season of darkness, etc., etc., etc. So let's get into that. Let's get some of the downs over first, and then we'll go up, then we'll move on to the ups. Utah is, as all of you very well know, in Yellowcrest, a very pro-rights, pro-land rights state. Property rights are sacrosanct. And as a result of that, even in recent years, as all of you know, the legislature has made it very difficult to engage with preservation, especially on a neighborhood level. So teardowns are common in your neighborhood and many other neighborhoods where, as a preservationist, I hate to see them occur. One of the most recent hits that especially historic districts, local historic districts took, this was back in 2021, last year, during a special session of the legislature, which came out of the blue. No one was expecting this. They being, well, our legislature, they passed a regulation that made it more difficult to create business or residential district design. And in many ways, this was to, at least what they said, was to ameliorate the exorbitant costs of new construction. It also, one could argue, met and checked the boxes off a lot of lists that developers in the state wanted to have checked in terms of getting their products to the market faster with less regulation over what they built. They could build things less expensively and more quickly and just process this new housing construction through. There was a few lines that dealt with historic districts. This bill, 1003, basically forbade any new historic districts in areas that were substantially developed after the calendar year 1950. You see that here on the bottom line. And it exempted historic districts that were established before January 1st, 2021, but it really has made it difficult to include any mid-century modern, or even as we move into time, anything built after 1950 in a historic district. Most of the neighborhood was built after 1950, even though the National Register of Historic Places now designates 1972 as kind of the threshold for national districts. Local historic districts are sort of stuck in 1950. So that was tremendously disappointing. And I imagine this will be more of an issue as we move forward into time and more neighborhoods built after 1950 will want to designate themselves as local historic districts. Another surprise that came out of the blue, this happened this year, was HB 262, which would have cut our tax credit, historic preservation tax credit for residential properties by 10%. So currently we have a 20% residential tax credit for all historic properties listed on the National Register. And this bill would have cut it down to 10%, which would have been a huge blow. Fortunately, this was defeated. So that's a bit of an up, but we were surprised that this was even brought forward. I will say that there was a tremendous amount of support to defeat this, which was incredibly heartening for me and for the organization I represent. On the upside, 2 weeks after the tax credit was going to be cut down to 20%, we were back up on the Hill working with Senator Darren Owens and Timothy Hawks, trying to get a tax credit for Utah that would impact commercial properties. Currently, we only have a residential state tax credit. And since the early 90s, we wanted a residential and a commercial tax credit for the state. This almost passed. 11:58, the last night of the legislative season, this came up. It was the next bill to be discussed, and they called the session. This would have gone through if curveballs hadn't been thrown in to the legislative discussion of that last night, like the transgender sports bill. That's really what held this up. But because we got very close, there's still a lot of momentum here. I think this will be a very easy bill to pass come legislative season 2023. But it was so sad to watch the clock, have this bill approach it's time for discussion, but then have the clock run out that very last second, literally the very last second of the legislative season. Another heartening thing that's happened is that we got Main Street America. This is an amazing program that had taken a 25-year vacation from Utah. We had it back in the 90s and early 2000s, and then it disappeared. But we have it back now, and this is a huge catalyst for preservation across the state, particularly in rural Utah. But we also have Main Street America districts here in Salt Lake, including the Granary and State Street. And this program is doing wonders across the state and in Salt Lake in particular. Of course, to go back to, it was the worst of times, we're seeing a lot of demolition of some character defining properties in Salt Lake, and this is very sad. Again, it goes back to land rights, and it goes back to the difficulties now we Utahns face in establishing local historic districts. A lot of the buildings that have been demolished and replaced with glass and steel boxes should have been designated as part of a local historic district. Ideally, that was how I would like to have seen all of this play out. But we are losing them because this process is very difficult now. On the upside, surprising things are getting preserved. Buildings in the Granary, for example. This is the Evo campus in the Granary. Here we have an article that says massive new Evo campus could help revamp the Granary district. And it's not a could, it's a will. It's an already has helped revamp the Granary district. What's amazing to me is, even perhaps 15 years ago, 20, certainly before that, this absolutely would have been a throwaway building. This is a building that no one would have blinked an eye to see disappear. But these sorts of buildings, especially in the Granary and along the west side of Salt Lake, are being restored and renovated and reinvigorated in surprising numbers. And this is very heartening to see. I think a lot of it has to do with the type of individual that these neighborhoods are trying to attract. A lot of tech companies are going here, a lot of computer type software developers, gaming companies. I think these people live so much in artificial reality, but to have something real and solid, and even from a previous century, is very comforting and sort of anchors them in the here and now, despite the fact that they spend, their professional life thinking about the distant future. So I think this is a really positive uptick, and it's not something that I think 20 years ago we would have expected to see happening, particularly in these areas. But it is happening, and it's wonderful. This is, by the way, a neighbor of all of yours, Warren Lloyd. This is his project. So the next time you see Warren Lloyd, give him a pat on the back. Other exciting things that are happening in preservation relate to sort of the long arc of history. Preservation Utah, like I said a few minutes ago when I started my presentation, was founded in 1966. This is a pivotal moment in American history. 2 years before, Preservation Utah was founded in 1966, 1964, the Civil Rights Act was signed by Lyndon B. Johnson. And then shortly after we were established, the Historic Preservation Act was also signed by the same president, with very much the encouragement of Lady Bird Johnson. What's interesting is that the Utah Heritage Foundation, Preservation Utah, and a lot of other preservation organizations did not necessarily engage with this history, the history of that moment in the 60s when a lot of us were founded, as much as we should have when we were established. Preservation Utah was really invested in saving Gilded Age and Pioneer era structures. And some of our proudest saves fall into those categories. City County Building, Gilded Age, Pioneer tabernacles up and down the Wasatch Front. A lot of them stand because we existed. Well, move forward decades in the century, and these two histories just have to meet. It's long past time that they meet. So Preservation Utah is now engaged with communities that we haven't really engaged with for most of our history. In a few weeks, and I invite all of you to this event, we are having our Utah Preservation Conference. We haven't had this conference for about, it's been almost 4 years. We are having this conference on the west side of Salt Lake in the Art Castle. We're very proud that we're having it there. We're going to be celebrating the local cultures on the west side, a lot of the immigrant communities that have settled there. And that will be very much part of the dialogue that we will engage with during our preservation conference to an extent that has never happened before, in other conferences that we've held over our long history. We'll be working later this year with the National Trust for Historic Preservation in preserving, with the help of a fund the National Trust has recently established, helping to preserve Salt Lake City's AME Church. And I really hope this works out for the AME congregation and for Salt Lake City and for Preservation Utah and preservation generally in Utah. This is a treasure, oftentimes overlooked treasure in Salt Lake that absolutely needs to be saved. And now we are in this present moment, right, where the history of diversity and inclusion is catching up even in popular culture with trends. We can do this. We can do this work, and it's easier than it's ever been in any time looking to the past. Another congregation we're working with, installed in this wonderful 1894 former LDS chapel, is Al Rasul. It's a mosque, and I was there a couple of nights ago celebrating Ramadan with these great people. Again, it's an immigrant community. We're happy to help them restore their former church, now mosque, and make them more settled and comfortable in their new home here in Utah. Of course, all of this new is wonderful, but we will always love and celebrate the communities who, for decades now, have embraced preservation. This goes to the question of whether their communities outside of Salt Lake really do good things with preservation. Ogden has done wonders with preservation, not just on 25th Street, but all throughout the community. They have local historic sites, local historic districts. Provo, they don't have local historic districts, but they do have local historic sites. And they have a wonderful historic commission, which oversees all of that. Spring City, a great pioneer town, probably the best preserved Utah pioneer town. The unofficial retiring spot for all architectural historians and preservationists in Utah. This is where by law, it seems like we all have to end up. And here shortly around Memorial Day, they'll be holding their traditional house tour, and with funds from their house tour, which they hold a couple of times a year, they've done amazing things for preservation there in Middle Utah and Sanpete County. And then the newest community, which is really sort of a preservation superstar, is Helper. If any of you haven't gone to Helper recently, please do. It's a wonderful, thriving art scene, a cultural scene. It's amazing. They're restoring all of the old buildings along Main Street, and it's just so much fun to be there. These are communities, because they have embraced historic preservation, I think these are the communities with the strongest identities in Utah. When you think of classic Utah towns, these are towns that come to mind, and it's not by mistake. It's because they have invested in preservation. Of course, the same is true with Salt Lake. Neighborhoods like the Avenues, they have a strong identity because of their historic districts. Of course, I'm not going to leave you guys out, Yellcrest, because of your efforts to preserve your neighborhood. And I know as much as this has brought has been a frustrating process, it's also reaped huge rewards. And oftentimes when I live in a place, I can't see the impact that a lot of actions, big and small, have made cumulatively over the years. But as a non-resident of Yellcrest, whenever I drive through this community, this neighborhood of yours, I feel what you have done and what you've accomplished. And you can be very proud of that. In the spirit of, again, inclusivity, Preservation Utah is also going to be championing in the next few weeks the Central City Historic District. This is one of Salt Lake City's most overlooked historic districts, but has so much potential. It's going through a lot of changes, both good and bad. And as a way to help more of the good happen, Preservation Utah decided last year to hold our historic home tour in this neighborhood. That will happen on May 21st. And I would not be a good executive director if I didn't call for volunteers and help with this. We are looking for helpers to facilitate this tour and enable other people who attend the tour, other residents of Salt Lake and cities beyond, understand what a treasure the Central City Historic District really is. We have other events like a grant that we've opened up and other events that will highlight the uniqueness of this particular neighborhood. I don't know how long I spoke. Oftentimes when I speak, I lose track of time. I probably have gone over. I apologize if I have. Jan, do we have time for questions?
You've gone over, but it's been enlightening.
Okay, well, I
And,
apologize.
No. I meant that kindly. This is a subject that doesn't often get the bright lights, and it should. I'll interject my own personal opinion here. I think I'm glad to see that you are going to concentrate on the Central City. I think the Central City is under siege right now, and it's going to get the attack right now on our historic districts in that part of Salt Lake. It to me is just not looking good. I think new and shiny things are kind of what seems to be the attraction. I will get off my podium and let people go ahead and ask questions if they'd like.
I have a question. This is Lynn Pershing. On SB 234, that regards historic tax credits for commercial properties, the legislature calls themselves into special session all the time, and they typically pass, 12 bills at least during that time. Can we get that on some special session agenda?
Yeah, I've asked that question to the Utah Cultural Alliance, who is really our lobbyist partner in this. And they say it's a possibility, but this will probably require more of an organized effort than a special session allows. I mean, it really did take quite a lot of effort. We had pulled out all of the developers. We had 25 mayors up and down Utah write letters. A lot of that's hard to do with the special sessions. But it is possible. What we're hoping to do is if a window doesn't open up during the course of the next 10 months or so, what we'd like to do is put a real lobbying effort forward for commercial tax credits and pass the bill and also perhaps get funding for it. I think maybe that will require then doing it in the regular session, but we certainly have the option when if an opportunity arises to do it during a special session. So thanks for your question, Lynn. Any other questions? Again, I'm mindful of everyone's time. So
David,
if you have questions, just email me, david@preservationutah.org, david@preservationutah.org. I'm happy to chat with you on the phone, chat with you over email, telegraph,
David,
things like
just
that.
a quick follow-up. What do you think is needed right now to call more attention to preserving, especially in Salt Lake, because that's where we live? I'm so happy to see how these other cities are stepping up. What does it take? At what level do we have to move forward? Who has to hear the message and follow through?
A lot of that is really facilitated with political leadership who is interested in preservation. A number of recent additions to the Salt Lake City Council are very invested in preservation. We look forward to working with those new members as well as the old ones on this question. we would love to see Mayor Mendenhall champion preservation in ways that we have, well, we've worked particularly with her staff to articulate. So anytime any of you see those good people, raise the issue. We'd love to see this become a real campaign issue where it really hasn't been for many years in Salt Lake City particularly. Any other questions? All right, thank you all. Sorry for getting your meeting off to a delayed, well, start.
That's okay.
But
Dave.
we appreciate the time so much, all of us at Preservation Utah.
We so appreciate your presentation, David, and we hope to have you back again, maybe for a follow-up in the year or so to come, and keep in touch with you. Thank you.
I look forward to that. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Our next presenter is going to be Sarah Jarovanek. And Sarah, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I know that I need to get you in as a, hang on here. Sarah, I want to make you a, if I can get a co-host. I think, Sarah, you have a PowerPoint, is that correct?
Yes, and it looks like I can share my screen already. So I think I am set.
And Sarah, just quickly introduce you. Sarah is a senior planner at the Salt Lake City Planning Department division, and is the brain power behind the affordable housing overlay. And we're really looking forward to hearing about that tonight, Sarah. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for that introduction. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Get a couple things straight here. So thank you for inviting me to discuss the affordable housing incentives. As you said, I'm Sarah Jarovanek, as planner with Salt Lake City. So what I wanted to do tonight is just kind of briefly give you a brief overview of the amendments, and then talk a little bit about how they specifically apply to Yalecrest. Generally, the amendments apply to zoning districts that allow residential uses. They are a tool that is proposed to be added to the zoning code that incentivizes the building or preserving of affordable housing. And one thing that I think is important to acknowledge is that this project is to modify zoning requirements. And this is what's under the purview of the planning division. We know and we understand that there are issues and concerns that zoning cannot address, including job wages, home prices, and outside of these proposed amendments, the types of units constructed and the rents charged. And so the goal of the incentives are to do two things. The first is to help tax dollars and private dollars that go into building affordable projects create more housing units. The proposal includes the use of density bonuses, shortening approval timelines, and modifying some zoning regulations to make that happen. Second, the incentives may open the door for property owners to start thinking about how their property may be used to provide new affordable housing units. In many zoning districts, zoning rules currently prohibit some property owners from investing in their property to build more housing. And so a key component of this is defining what affordability means. The incentives are tied to a definition of affordability, with a greater incentive for those homes that are affordable to those with the lowest incomes. And any property that uses the incentives will be deed restricted for a certain number of years to ensure that the homes subject to the incentives remain at an affordable level. So for mixed use and multifamily zones, it allows a variety of incentives. There's additional height of 1 to 3 stories, additional housing types in some zoning districts, and it also removes the provision for an additional story in a transit station area or TSA zoning districts. These would require 20% of the units to be set aside as affordable unless 2 or more bedrooms are provided, and then 10% of the units would need to be set aside as affordable. Affordable would be defined as 80% of AMI for income and rent, and then it may provide some relief from planning processes, but it would not remove the design standards that projects must meet. And then for additional housing types, it would add design standards for row houses and other housing types, and then require the units that are restricted to those with incomes at or below 80% AMI. Then there are also some modifications proposed for single and 2 family districts that would be incentives. These districts include the FR, the R1, and the SR zones. It would allow additional housing types in areas near high-frequency transit or adjacent to arterial roadways. And there has been some consideration to allowing these more broadly and not tying them to higher frequency transit. The additional housing types that are proposed are 2-family or duplex residences, triplex and 4-plex units, and townhouses in groups of 3 to 4. And these would be required to meet design standards, and half of these units would need to be affordable at 80% of AMI for income and rent. The proposal does not include permitting ADUs in 2-family homes. By right, this was included earlier, but since the state legislature has permitted attached ADUs, this was removed. And then additionally, separate from this project, the city is considering removing the conditional use process for detached ADUs in single-family districts. For the RMF, or residential multifamily districts, it would remove density requirements provided that there are units designated as affordable. And this is generally 40% of the units at 60% AMI for both income and rent. And then there's a higher AMI for owner-occupied units. And so one of the reasons for this is that the current existing requirements for RMF zones make it difficult to build multifamily housing. The minimum lot size per unit can restrict the number of units often beyond what was built years ago with some of the earlier development in the 1920s and 1930s. And so the proposal would also permit some process modifications and generally provide for administrative review, but it would not modify design standards. It would also permit some modifications to standards related to lot area, lot width, setbacks, and lot coverage. And then so what I wanted to do is go ahead and talk about how it could apply in Yieldcrest. I'm going to switch to a different screen here. Give me just a second. So on the screen now, I have the general Yieldcrest neighborhood and outlined in purple. Have the sunny side up here, and then 13th South down here, and then 13th East on the left, and then 21st on the right. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn on zoning districts here just to kind of give you an idea of what those are in the Yieldcrest neighborhood. So you can see that most of it is zoned R1 5000 or R1 7000. And so generally these zoning districts, if you're in R1 5000, the minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet, and then in R1 7000, it'd be 7,000 square feet. But especially in areas like this, the zoning districts were often put in place after development occurred, and so the lot sizes may vary significantly from this. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the proposal would allow for additional housing types in these zoning districts that are within a 1/4 mile of high frequency transit. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn that off, and then just show you. So these parcels in yellow, these are the ones that are within a 1/4 mile of high frequency transit and then arterial roads. And so in the Yieldcrest area, the high frequency transit would be buses that run every 15 minutes. And so there are those on 900 South, 13th East, and then 21st East, and then properties adjacent to arterial roads. And so that includes Sunnyside and 13th East. And so the additional housing types, as I mentioned before, they include single family attached houses as row houses or sideways row houses in groups of 3 or 4, and then duplexes, triplexes, and 4plexes. Previously, these were permitted in many areas of Salt Lake, and then over time, the zoning in these areas have become more restricted. It would allow these building types as a permitted use, provided half of the units were restricted as affordable, and it would also be up to the property owner to pursue any changes and development or redevelopment. The proposal would allow these uses with additional design standards, and then it would allow some modifications to the existing standards, as I mentioned earlier, for setbacks, and then would also remove the minimum lot width requirement. It would allow for additional building coverage if building coverage on the block face already exceeded the maximum permitted. However, it would not allow for additional building height beyond what is permitted for existing structures. So in addition to these single family zones, there are a few other zoning districts in Yellowcrest. Kind of on the boundary here, at 17th East and 13th South, there are a few CN districts, and CN allows for mixed use development. And then in this area right now, there's a maximum building height of 25 feet, and the incentives would permit one additional story in this zoning district if there was affordable housing provided. And then there are kind of on the edge here, a couple RMF 35 properties. And I talked just a little bit about RMF earlier. And so in this area, there would be no additional height permitted, but if the proposal would meet the affordability requirements, there would be the removal of density requirements, including additional design standards if there were to be row houses or sideways row houses, and cottage developments and those other property types I talked about. And then there are some modifications permitted to the requirements for lot standards. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the previous screen here. Hold on just a second, one more time. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about were the next steps for the process. And so as far as that's concerned, the next steps are additional outreach opportunities. We've had some in-person events, and we have a couple more scheduled for next week. There's one at Riverside Park next Tuesday, and then Lindsay Gardens on Thursday. You can also review the draft document online at the project webpage, and I can go ahead and post that link in the chat too. There are a number of different documents on the page about it. There's a 2-page summary. There's also a document that has a lot of what we just talked about in more detail. And then there's a version of that includes some appendices with the draft ordinance language text. And then more information about what was changed from that initial proposal in 2020. We also recently posted 2 standalone videos that go into more detail. One talks about the mixed use and multifamily districts, and then the other talks about the RMF and single family districts. We also have a YouTube video with more details on different aspects of the proposal. This was made as part of a Facebook Q&A event in February. And then below all of that, there is a form to submit comments. We do have a planning commission hearing scheduled for May 11th. The planning commission will review and make a recommendation on the proposed amendments to the city council. And then there will be an opportunity for public comment at the planning commission hearing. And then in the future, the city council will hold additional meetings and they will make the final decision on the proposal. And that is what I had for a presentation. Are there questions?
Thank you, Sarah. Questions? Lynn?
Thanks, Sarah. I was kind of amazed at how much of Yellowcrest was available to be developed into multifamily housing. It looks even more greater than what I saw at the Sugar House Council, to be quite honest. So I guess my question is, we just previously had a presenter who deplored demolitions happening in our neighborhood, which I would agree with. 56 over the last 20 some years. How would this housing ordinance interact with demolitions? Someone buy a house, a developer would buy a house and then demolish it and install these multifamily housing? Is that how you see it happening, or how would you see this happening?
Sure. So I think that, it's important to point out that it would permit up to 4 units on a property. It would not permit more than that in these R17 or R15,000 zones, which is what makes up kind of nearly all of the Yellowcrest area. And it would be up to the property owner if that was something that they wanted to pursue. It would also allow for the conversion of existing dwellings into duplex or other type, or maybe even more than just 2 units in a single house. So I think that there's a few different ways that it could occur, and it just depends on the property and the property owner. But it would allow for these things in these R15,000, R17,000, and the other districts that are single family right now throughout the city. And so, I think it's important to, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen one more time.
Can I just ask real quick while you're finding something? Is this conditional use mitigation, or will this just override everything? Everything we have. In other words, we have 2 things going on in Yellcrest. We have the Yellcrest compatible infill overlay, and this would override that. Is that right? And this, because the heights are quite different. And then also, how do I say it? We have local historic districts, and you'd allow this in local historic districts as well. Is that correct?
So it would not override the existing standards except as identified in the proposal itself. So just looking at the height that's permitted, for example, in the Yellcrest overlay infill, it would not allow for any additional height beyond what is proposed, or not, I'm sorry, it would not allow for any additional height beyond what is allowed right now in that district. And then as far as local historic districts, there would be changes. The changes would apply in local historic districts, but they would need to meet the local historic district requirements. They need to meet the standards that are in our zoning ordinance, and they'd also need to meet the residential design guidelines for historic districts.
But typically that would allow demolition, and local historic districts are there to prevent demolitions. So this is a little confusing. I'll let other people talk. I'll write.
Kind of, I just would like to answer that question. So as far as areas with local historic districts, I can go ahead and just kind of show where those are within Yellcrest. So
We have 6.
right, so you can kind of see them showing up over those yellow areas in that light blue color. So that's where the local historic districts are. And then you can see Westmoreland down there. And so in those local historic districts, it would be very difficult, the same as it is today, to have demolitions of contributing historic structures. They would need to go through the process that's in place right now. That process wouldn't change. And then I think if there were non-contributing structures, or in areas where there might be vacant lots or out of period structures, things like that, there might be more possibility for demolitions with those structures.
Wow. Wow. This is pretty substantial, quite honestly. And this is not helping preserve our historic neighborhoods. This is encouraging demolition of our historic neighborhoods based on money. I just wanted to share with you today that over the last 2 weeks, I've gotten 4 emails and texts asking to buy my property. Are you ready? It's not homeowners, it's actually businesses or corporations are coming in, and they already own a number of houses actually in our neighborhood. These are the ones I most worry about being demolished, because if they can put 4 units on a small lot, they will, because it's a lot of money for them. This is very concerning and has great impacts on their neighbors. As we've talked about before, when you do this on a corner of a street face, it doesn't have as big an impact as if you do it in the middle of the street face or the block face. This destroys continuity of identity of a block face. This can be quite disturbing. I really think we need to think about where we place these kinds of structures, honestly. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. I think Jim, Jim. Jim Peckman, and then Mike Mallon, and then Jim Webster, in that order. Please go ahead.
So you mentioned a couple of times eliminating the minimum lot size requirements. Can you explain what that means? Does that mean they could build right up to the property line if, say, they were replacing a house with 4 townhomes?
Sure. So what it would do is it would eliminate a minimum lot width requirement. And so right now we have a minimum lot width of 50 feet in most of these zoning districts, or at least in the ones that were generally in Yellcrest. And so in some areas, maybe not necessarily in Yellcrest, there are some lots that do have a smaller width than that, and it can make these difficult to develop. And so the intent is to allow some of these more difficult to develop properties to be able to develop. And then as far as setbacks, for the front setback, it would not allow any change from the existing front setback. Right now, it would allow for some minor modifications to the side and rear yard setbacks of up to 25%. So for example, in R1 5000, there is a 4-foot setback on one side and a 10-foot setback on the other. And so it could allow for, 1 to 2 feet for each of those side yard setbacks.
Okay, I think I got it.
Mhm.
Mike Mellon. Thank you, Jim. Mike, are you unmuted?
Yes,
Oh.
can you hear me now?
Yes, Mike.
I happen to live on Harvard in a historic district, and I'm happy about that. Some of these other areas that are not historic districts, is it too late for them to become historic districts to maybe prevent some of these family housing units to happen?
Additional historic districts can be added to the city. I haven't had experience with working on adding one of those to the city, but they can be added. It is a lengthy process. I know others that are in this meeting have had a lot more experience with that. But I can give you some contact information as far as who to talk to and kind of what the process is for that. So that they could be added, more could be established. At the same time, I think that there is unlikely to be significant change within local historic districts. Any change would need to meet the existing residential design guidelines and standards, but the proposal for the different housing types would still apply in the local historic districts.
Okay.
Jim Webster.
Yeah, my concern is that we already have a situation in Yalecrest where the city has done an abysmal job of regulating landscape maintenance. You can pick out a rental without even thinking about it, driving down various streets. There's just absolutely no consideration whatsoever for that. We've got parking issues already, and you're talking about increasing the density without consideration of where the parking is going to occur. Side yard setbacks violate fire codes on an international fire code basis. I'm concerned about that. And have you done any baseline monitoring of 1950s and post-war multifamily rentals that maybe could be targeted for some consideration without impacting historic structures?
Sure. So just want to point out that this wouldn't, all codes, building codes, fire codes, all of those requirements would still need to be met. So in some areas, it may not allow for much deviation. It may not allow for any modifications, but it would be something that could be an option. And then as far as that last question, can you repeat that one more time? I'm just not sure how to answer that.
Well, as you drive through Yalecrest, you'll find that there's a lot of single level rentals that are not contributing. Okay.
Mhm.
Perhaps we could begin to think about just looking at those units without demolishing any other type of unit. And as long as they could meet an architectural standard that made some sense, that might be possible. There's some along 9th South, there's some along LeGrand, there's all over the place. And it seems to me that we could be looking at those in a judicious fashion and saying, look, architecturally, these are not contributing to the historic nature of the city. If we're going to do row houses, townhouses, or whatever you're looking at, that could be an improvement. And I can go that far, but the rest of it, I think, is really out of line.
Okay, I understand what you're saying now. Sure, and I think one thing that we're trying to do is trying to make it so that it's an option. And a lot of areas in the city, 50 or 100 years ago, having this mix of housing types in a neighborhood was an option. And so, if these are non-contributing, or if these aren't in historic districts, those properties that you're mentioning, they might be more likely candidates just based on those characteristics, and they might be more likely to redevelop than other properties that are in Yellcrest.
Yeah, I'd like to see a baseline inventory of those, because they're grandfathered for a number of reasons, but they're certainly not contributing.
Mm-hmm. And then I also just wanted to mention, as far as parking is concerned, the proposal would require in these R1 5000 and R1 7000 districts, at least one off-street parking space per unit. So there is some parking required as well.
Okay.
Parking on the site or street parking?
On the site.
Yeah, she referred to that as off-street parking.
Any more questions? This is kind of a theoretical question, Sarah. Has the city sort of stepped back and took a deep breath about what does it mean, to have a neighborhood, and what constitutes a neighborhood? And do you see those communities types breaking down with something like this, or you don't? Obviously, it's going to be an overlay that will affect every neighborhood in the city. I'm just wondering, theoretically, if anyone has sort of stepped back from the edge and thought about that.
I mean, just in my opinion, kind of thinking, theoretically and really broadly, I think that, we started this project a couple of years ago, and just thinking about everything that's happened over the past couple of years. I think two really big things that have happened. Obviously, you have COVID, but also had a really huge increase in housing prices. And I think more and more for people, it's harder for people to stay in neighborhoods where they grew up, or it's harder for them to imagine their kids being able to stay in these neighborhoods. And so I think what we're trying to do is to make it so that, there are options for people. It's not, people don't always want to have a single family home, or maybe they can't afford it, or maybe, they downsize and they still want to stay in the neighborhood. And this might give them an opportunity for another place to live. And, maybe you could have some other family member live in their place. I think there's a lot of different ways to think about it, just kind of thinking kind of off the top of my head. I see that there's a few different questions in the chat. I just wanted to respond to one. There's a one, I think it was a direct one, but I just want to mention as far as ADUs, there was a bill at the state legislature. I don't know too many details on it. I can look into it if I need to. But there was a bill at the state legislature that permitted internal or attached ADUs. And so if there are some mother-in-law apartments that might exist in the neighborhood, I would definitely recommend looking into that, that bill that was adopted, to see if that's a way of legalizing these units if they might not have been able to have been legalized another way. And then looks like there was that question about neighborhood stability. And then I think that, there's a question here that's also about climate change. And I think, we just heard from David Ammett, and I think kind of the mantra of preservation is, the greenest building is the one that's already built. And so I can understand kind of some of these conflicts with, you have all of these existing buildings that are in a historic district, and kind of why are we making it so there could be a change. And I think, you know, it would be great if there could be some conversions, or if you can legalize some of these mother-in-law apartments through, you know, what the state legislature has done, or maybe something that we're doing as part of this program, and just having more places for people to live, maybe having fewer tear downs that, you know, go from having a 1,500 square foot house to a larger house. I think that could be considered something that's kind of greener and better for climate change as well. And, you know, we're also looking to kind of encourage these units in areas that are close to transit, that will make it so people don't have to necessarily drive everywhere all of the time. And I know there's kind of questions about how much people use transit, but, you know, the more it's there, the more people might use it, the more places there are to take it to. I think, you know, there's a lot of different things that are going on as far as kind of just looking at what we consider historic today and what people might have considered historic 50 years ago. Just again, reflecting back to what David Emmett talked about with what the early preservationists with Preservation Utah or Utah Heritage Foundation were interested in preserving. And it, I don't know too much about that history, but it does seem like there was a lot that really focused on those pioneer era structures, and then maybe, let's say, South Temple, and kind of just those mansions that I think everyone kind of thinks of. And I think that to a lesser extent, they were looking, or actually at that point, they weren't looking at some of those new mid-century modern buildings. And so, you know, what people think of as historic and what they really, places they really kind of cherish does change over time. And I think that, you know, part of this is recognizing that, you know, Salt Lake City is growing, and we need to adapt, and in some ways, in some small ways in some areas, and some larger ways in other areas where, you know, closer to downtown, we might be allowing more floors and buildings and things like that. And so, you know, we want to try to preserve everything we have, but at the same time, make it so people can continue to live here, and that there's are, you know, housing options available for them throughout the community.
Well, and I would just add, I think Salt Lake City's made a tremendous contribution to housing, what, 26,000 apartments and 9,000 more on the way. I mean, I think the city has rolled up its sleeves in that regard. And I just hope that other cities will start to feel, you know, the obligation, if you want to call it, or, you know, their civic duty to kind of fill in and provide housing, because I don't think Salt Lake City can bear the burden of all of that. And I think I was the Ken Gardner Institute or somebody. It's, you know, when I think, and you would know this better, Sarah, than I, because you're right there in planning. It's been one of the largest, you know, planning developments we've ever had in the city, ever, historically. And I don't know, you know, I would also hope that, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I hope that it does. I would emphasize the importance. What does it mean to have a neighborhood, and what are the cohesive elements of a neighborhood? And is the city concerned about that? And how do all these things fit together? And I'd love to see more lively conversation about that, and maybe it's already going on. Any more questions? I see some hands up, but maybe those are previous questions that people had their hands up. Lynn?
I just have one more. I'd like to make a statement about a quarter mile from high frequency public transportation. We actually have none on the East Bench at all. And in fact, we have very little in Yalecrest. So it's difficult to understand how we can even meet these criteria, to be quite honest. And, you know, build it and it will come is a 25-year gap. So I caution the city to include some of these especially our small neighborhood, we already have quite a few rentals. We have duplexes. We have lots of multifamily situations. We've had an increase in ADUs going on garages. We've never had a problem in Yale-Crest with attached ADUs or basement ADUs because we've always had those. We've always had those. But when we start outbuildings, and now you're not including these in the lot coverage, you are starting to put incredible density in a climate that is increasing to 100 degrees now in the summer for over a month. You're getting rid of all the green space that keeps our community cool. And this is concerning. This is an antithesis to all of the city's sustainability ordinances. So I'm a little confused about this. But my last point is about the 80% AMI. We talk about affordable housing. 80% AMI is not, that's not really the issue. The issue on affordable housing is 30 and 50% AMI. And I think you're trying to pass this with saying, oh, well, these are, people that have pretty much the same standard of living as you do. And yet you're increasing the density and taking away your quality of life. It's a little concerning, Sarah. Seriously, it's very concerning. But I'll make my comments online. Thank you.
We hope we're not a tough group up here.
No problem.
We have a lot of opinions and we like to have lively debate. And so I hope you understand that, that's part of who we are and we like to engage in conversations and discussions.
Sure. And I mean, talking about neighborhoods and what it means to be a neighborhood and kind of what gives a neighborhood its character, what gives, a community its character, and all of those things are important considerations and important discussions.
If there are, oh, Jim?
No, I'm just glad to hear that we're giving some consideration to the quality of life. I mean, you drive by these rental units, if it's a moonscape, it's probably a rental.
Well, and one of the things we heard from our surveys, we did a couple surveys early on in the process, was that people were really looking for more opportunities for owner-occupied housing. We had just mentioned how there have been a lot of apartments that have been going in. And we don't, in our zoning code, we don't really regulate owner versus rental. But one thing that we are thinking can occur with especially these amendments that would be affecting the single family districts is that it would provide opportunities potentially for ownership of a condo or ownership of a townhouse, and really trying to provide that as an opportunity at a more affordable level for people in the community.
Good.
Sarah, thank you. I'm sure that this is just the beginning of many more discussions and opportunities to look at this and talk about it. And we'd love to have a copy of your presentation so we can we'll post it on our website and just let everybody know. But thank you for coming and being with us tonight.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Thank you for all the questions. I'm going to go ahead and put my contact information in the chat here if you have any questions. And I'll also post a link to the project page in there too.
Thank you so much. And thanks, everybody. We kind of set up little timelines for all of our presenters, but we get so engaged with what we're doing that obviously I hate to cut off debate and discussion, because I think that's part of what we're here for to do, is to listen. Damien, I see that you're still online, and we want to invite now Damien Choi to be our next presenter. And we're looking forward to hearing from you, Damien. You're if I understand correctly, you're the traffic enforcement officer. So everybody look out. If you park in the wrong places, Damien is going to get you. No, he seems like a very nice fellow. And our concern, Damien, particularly has been during game day events, the University of Utah. And if you could just address that, we would, or provide some statistics. I think you were going to dig into that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for allowing me to give you a couple minutes of my time. And then I want to just kind of give a kind of really just have a conversation with you all about it. So I know the pendulum has kind of swung from the pandemic to last season. I'm sure you saw a heavier amount of traffic in your area of where you live. And so just to let you know, my team at compliance, we actually, I have a couple of extra officers that are assisting with every home game day, as well as concerts, whatever is going on at the U. We make sure that we are very sensitive and try to make sure that people that are parking in that area, that are going to the stadium, that are parking in your neighborhoods, and we're just holding them compliant of all city ordinances. I have to tell you, always, and I was with an officer on the first game day. We gave out about over 300 tickets on the first game day. And then obviously it kind of fluctuates, it kind of vacillates back and forth because there's a variety of folks that come from all over to see the events that are going on. And so some people learn, and some people will, we've been given multiple tickets for the same citation of breaking the same ordinance. And so, for the rest of the games, I want to say statistically, our ticket numbers kind of go down because people now have learned I have to pay my fine and things like that. And so I want to say by our last game, there's a lot of nuances with this because the last game is after Thanksgiving. Our numbers are pretty low. And so the ticket count really just fluctuates, but definitely goes lower as the season goes on. Now, I am very aware of there is now an kind of an escalation of other city events, of other events going on at the U, and we are aware of that. And so we will continue to offer my team to focus on that area, but we also have to focus on the other areas of the city as well. And so that is, it's quite a balance, but just to let you know, you are not forgotten when you have a lot of heavy traffic in that area. So, but I'm happy to answer some questions.
Anyone have questions?
I do.
Jim? Oh, Jim and then Lynn. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question we just found out about the Garth Brooks concert. It wasn't something that we were made aware of by the university, and that happens a lot. There's buildings going up all the time on Guardsman Way that we never learn about until they're actually under construction. So we're not expecting much from the university anymore. But my understanding is the mayor has to approve a permit for these events. Is there a consideration from your department for parking? Because the person who comes to a football game is not the same person that comes to Monster Jam or Garth Brooks. And so your learning curve that you're talking about isn't necessarily applicable.
So Jim, can I clarify, what are you specifically asking?
Well, when the city issues a permit for an event to occur at Rice-Eccles Stadium, are you involved in that process?
No, compliance department is not involved in that scheduling any of those permits.
Okay, I thought so.
Lynn, did you have a question?
So I guess I'm a little confused. I'm sorry, I didn't understand, Damien, I guess that you're in the compliance office. But anyway, I guess my point is this. I really applaud the University of Utah for providing tracks in their tickets, the use of tracks. But the biggest problem for these other events, all these sports events and all these other events, is that we don't have any mass transit on the east side of our city, none. And so that's why all these people come and park in our neighborhood for a parking lot because they have no other choice. So let's get something done about that. And maybe we could have some rapid bus transit along Foothill for these major events that to maybe coordinate permitting with the university that includes that, so they can come from the Olympus Hills Mall or somewhere even farther south and jump on that bus and come on in 12 minutes, go to their event and then go back there and go home from there instead of parking in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, I had a good discussion with Dan Dugan. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we used to go to San Francisco 49er football games, and that was exactly what we did. I mean, we lived in the East Bay. We drove across the bridge and went to a place where you could park and it was okay to park, and caught a bus and went to the game. And so I think Lynn's on to something there.
I think, Jen, when Sean briefed the last time, when there's events at the University at Rice Eccles, they do provide a free pass. And I think he said 25% of the member or attendees at these events are taking mass transit. But the problem is that the other 75 are not. So there is a large number that do take the mass transit. It's just that it's at 25. And Lynn, your question about the BRTs, I just had a discussion with WFRC, and I continue to try to figure out how we get the BRTs up Foothill. Right now it's a tough road to capture because there's no place where they're starting. They're not starting in one location. They're ending in one location, but they're not starting in one location. That's the hard part right now.
They need to start in multiple locations, but
right. But we need to have the parking there in those multiple locations down in Cottonwood and Sandy and stuff. So I'm getting off track, sorry.
But thank you for looking into it.
Damien, I'm curious to know, what are people ticketed for? You started out with 300 on the first, what are the typical violations?
It is a variety of pieces. So sometimes it's opposite of traffic. It is blocking fire hydrants. So it's a variety of safety issues. Sometimes they are blocking driveways. So we will not only cite them, but we will relocate their vehicle, near an area, and then we'll make sure to notify them that we have moved their vehicle because they've blocked an area of traffic and whatnot. And then sometimes it is registration. There's a variety of ordinances that my officers go through and just make sure that everyone is compliant in that.
Well, I certainly appreciate what you're doing. Robin, do you have a question? Robin Carbaugh?
Yes, yes. Officer, I live on Sunnyside Avenue, and it's the first row of event parking for University of Utah events. And quite frequently, my household and nearby households have to go out and dissuade event attendees from blocking our driveway or parking so close to our driveway that we can't get out.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of a tenuous proposition in the era that we live in. How would you recommend doing that or not doing it, and to be safe? We've had some situations in my household in particular where attendees have argued with us about being able to have their bumper up to our driveway. So, and that's a really difficult situation to be in now. how would you like us to address that?
Sure. I would encourage you to call our office, and I'll write this in the chat, Jan. But I would encourage you to call our office, and we can get an officer up there and have them mediate that process for you. I think that would be the safest. And if our officer is feeling unsafe, we escalate it up to PD, and we get Salt Lake PD to assist with that.
Is there any way of communicating that that's there's different priorities, right? Everything within the city system and public safety has it as a priority ranking. How is it best to communicate that as a priority?
Well, we would ask that if you communicate that to our team members, we will try, depending on where that officer is, we will try to get within that call 15 to 25 minutes. It really varies on our staffing and where an officer is at.
Sorry, just to jump in real quick, is using the mobile app, is that a good way to go about this? Take a picture and use the mobile app?
Absolutely, Dan. Yes, that also is helpful, and sometimes, sometimes people are very technology savvy and want to use the app, but also sometimes people want to have a confirmation and have a conversation with someone on my team, and I'm open to whatever people feel comfortable with, whatever tools that are available for the public. I want to make sure people take advantage of that.
There's a question in the chat, Damien, about how many hours can an unidentified car park in front of my house before I call you?
So there is an ordinance of 48 hours. If that unidentified car is parked in front of your house for more than 48 hours, please give us a call. Please give us the listing of the license plate, the make, the model, the color. That all really helps my officers go out and make sure that they are taking care of the correct car. So, and obviously the address too.
Well, Damien, we appreciate your service to the city and your service to us. And we understand we keep you busy on game day. Now,
I'm happy to assist.
well, thank you. And if we have follow-up questions, we can share those with you afterwards. But we appreciate you being with us tonight.
Absolutely. And I'll put the parking enforcement mailbox and our direct line in the chat for you all. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Damien. Well, we've been quite chatty tonight, and Dan and Jamie have been very, very patient. And our Salt Lake detective has dropped off, Sam Fallows. He couldn't wait any longer. He's got to get back to work. And so again, my apologies to Dan and my apologies to Jamie. And Jamie, I just want to say that, and Dan, I'm going to take a little bit of your time here, but Jamie's going to be migrating to another position in the city. And we are so going to miss you, Jamie. You have just been terrific in every way. I think some of your great qualities of how even-tempered you are. You're kind of a fearless warrior for us. And, sometimes we yell and scream up here, but you don't seem to get your feathers ruffled, and neither does Dan. We appreciate both of you. But I'm gonna jump to Dan and then jump back to, I'm gonna let you close out the show, Jamie, because it'll be your last hurrah. But Dan, if you would go ahead and give us a report and tell us what's going on in the city.
All right, I'll be as quick as possible, and I'll let, so first of all, I'm gonna steal Jamie's thunder here on the COVID. Our COVID numbers, we're not using test data, we're actually using the wastewater treatment data. And our COVID numbers are very low at this time. They haven't started to spike like you have back east. In the high times, we were at a level called 4,000, whatever they measure. We're at 30 units of what they're measuring. So we're very low yet, and but we're tracking that on a daily and a weekly basis. And I have that reported every time we have a city council meeting. So we're keeping an eye on that. And we're keeping an eye on that across the state. Water, save your water, keep your sprinklers off. There's no need to do anything now. We're gonna have another serious season this year. So we gotta make sure we're preserving that. Xeriscaping, landscaping, rip your strip are all possible possibilities to save water that we can do. I'm talking to institutions right now to see if we can get some earlier volunteer at the university and different religious institutions to start saving water. We're starting our inland port contract right now, discussions and negotiations on the inland port, and that's going on. We need to have that done by the end of the calendar year. Slow down signs. If you need slow down signs, I got them. I'll drop them off at your house. Redistricting map. Take a look at the maps. There's 3 maps out of the 6 that I think are viable. There's 3 maps that I don't think are too viable. And I'm having discussions and I'm playing around with the maps. If you want to play around with the map with me, I'll be more than happy to do that. But we just need to share a screen and we can play around and we can discuss that. So Jan, if you want to do that, we can do that. Outdoor gatherings. I'm trying to get some outdoor meetings together with the different neighborhoods throughout District 6. I'm working with Vili on setting up some dates. We're still trying to figure that out, how we do that for the next several months in the different neighborhoods. Airport, we're seeing higher passenger rates than we had before COVID, and they're going through the roof right now, and as everybody knows. Try not to park there, have someone drop you off at the airport is my recommendation. I'd go a lot further, but I'm going to turn the time over to Jamie. And it's also budget season. I'll go wrap budget season, and we're looking at everybody's budget at this time. Thank you. Jamie, all yours.
Thank you, Dan. Short and sweet, and off to Jamie. Go ahead, Jamie.
I'll keep it short and sweet as well. Yeah, speaking of budget season, the mayor is going to be giving her budget address on May 3rd, 7 p.m. It's during the council session. You can tune in live and watch that to hear some of her priorities. Also looking ahead, since I won't be here to remind you guys. Well, I'll be with the city still, but just not in this position. April 23rd is the return of the Salt Lake City Marathon. I will post a link in the chat that has a list of road closures and delays and when they're expecting those to happen. The marathon starts at 7 a.m. on April 23rd, and it begins on the U's campus at the Olympic Legacy Bridge, and it ends downtown. It goes, I'm sure most of you know this, but it stretches all the way over to Holiday before coming back to downtown. So be aware of that, and we'll try to help get the information out as much as possible. And then finally, a lot of surface treatments for roads are coming up this summer season. We have compiled a list on our website and a map so you can look visually of where those will be. Those will also cause interruptions, but of course they won't all be at the same time. So check out that website as well. And as Jan mentioned, this is actually my last community council meeting. It's been so great to spend it with you all. I really appreciate how engaged everyone here is. I am moving to the civic engagement team, which provides kind of internal consulting on different departments, public outreach strategies. And I think that I have learned a lot from you all being here and learning how capable you all are and learning what expectations are on your end and how we can better serve you. So hopefully I can bring this experience into that other element, even though I won't be public facing. I'm hoping to bring this experience and let other departments know how awesome you guys all are. So I appreciate that. Jan, you've been great. You've really led this this group into a new era. It's been really great to see. And you guys are so lucky to have Councilmember Dugan. He is a vocal advocate. He's always willing to listen. So you're still in great hands with him. And my colleague, Tim Cosgrove, will be taking over in the interim. Tim he was actually a state representative in the legislature in his past life. He's very knowledgeable. So he will be here to help you while we hire my replacement. But look forward to seeing Tim, and thanks everyone.
Well, Jamie, let me just say again, what a pleasure it's been to work with you. You are to me the definition of what it means to be a great public servant, and I mean that in the highest sense. That people who go and go into government to serve and think about others and build communities and do good, that you certainly have all of those wonderful qualities. And you will be a great ambassador in your new civic engagement role, because, I think I think that you have learned, what you've seen of how different departments operate, that you'll bring that skill set into the picture. And Dan, yes, we do appreciate you. I just have to give one little aside here, that I was at one of the party conventions, just working through the candidate thing, and two of your colleagues on the council, I just happened to mention what district I was in, and they said some very flattering things about you. And I just thought I'd say that in front of everybody, because you are very well appreciated and well liked among your council colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we're very proud to have you, and proud to have you as our chair. Well, listen, it's 8:33. We ran way over, but I think it was a very productive meeting. We got through a lot, and next week or next month, we are going to bring some of our political candidates to the fore, and we might have a blended Zoom and in-person meeting. We're working on that. We'll let you know, and maybe we'll even have a little survey to see if there's some preferences. But thank you all for attending, and have a good Easter, have a good month, and we'll see you on May the 12th. Thanks so much.